You're listening to the Bear in Mind podcast, episode number 39.
A podcast uncovering identity, color, and love, where driving yourself crazy is totally sane and curable. Now your host, T. Vias.
I remember the first time I heard the expression being seen and heard. I remember going, yes, that is exactly what I was missing from my childhood. That I was not seen and heard for who I am authentically. I used to blog about mental health, and there were a group of us that we would comment on each other's blogs, and we would talk about this expression constantly of being seen and heard, and it felt like, yes, this is the reason for all of my suffering in life. It's because I was not seen and heard in my childhood, and now into adulthood, I don't feel seen and heard. And so that is actually the problem. And so when you feel like you found out kind of the problem, what you think is like the real problem, and you need to then, you find it out and you're like, okay, I need to go get the solution for it. So now all I need is to be seen and heard by somebody else. And so I did that. I said, okay, I'm going to now pursue this feeling of being seen and heard. And sometimes I would occasionally feel it, and then I would start judging people. Well, they don't really know how to see and hear me. They don't get me. That's also another expression. They don't really get me. And then about a few years ago, I realized that was actually wrong. I don't need to feel seen and heard in my life by somebody else. And it wasn't an easy thing to hear that, yeah, you're not going to actually be seen and heard by people. I mean, you might feel that way, and somebody else might trigger you to think that about that, but going out and searching it was just creating the misery over and over again in my head. I was causing my own suffering by thinking, okay, now if I go out in the world and I find out I'm seen and heard by somebody, then I solved my childhood problems. Yet the real problem with this expression of being seen and heard, and it's used a lot. It's used a lot to talk about parenting and things like that. And while I do think there is some truth to that when it comes to a parent seeing and hearing their own child, it's a little different in adulthood. Because when we think that we need to be seen and heard, it is the root of every single problem you will face in adulthood. And the fact that you're not being seen and heard, that's not actually the problem. The real problem is that you think that you should be seen and heard in your life, and that's going to come from somebody else in your life. That is actually the root cause of a lot of people's suffering and misery when it comes to adult relationships. Because then you go out there and you search it. You search out in the world for that feeling, and you chase after it. And I chased and chased after it, and I didn't even come close. The biggest problem with when we call it being seen and heard, we automatically kind of assume it's going to be this feeling, or it's going to come, we're just going to feel it with somebody. We're like, oh, wow, that person got me. And that's actually not true. It's really a thought that you're having, that person is seeing and hearing me, and then it causes a whole bunch of other kinds of emotions. So we'll often take it a step further into our relationships, thinking we should be with somebody in a romantic relationship or with a best friend, that person should see and hear us. And that's how you kind of know it's a thought, because each person's definition of being seen and heard is, there's going to be over 7 billion different definitions out there. And so that's why it's not really a feeling. It's just going to be something you're evaluating when somebody treats you a certain way, and then you're going to be like, oh, I really feel seen and heard, or they get me, they understand me, and then it creates this kind of emotion in you because someone has done something that according to kind of your script in life, they followed it. And the problem with scripts, and I've talked about this before, is that now you're relying on somebody else to create that kind of emotion in you. You know, someone needs to keep repeating that behavior in order for you to kind of feel that connection or that warmth that you get from thinking that you've been seen and heard. And so we're all human, and we're not always going to repeat certain behaviors in a certain way, because at some point we'll be angry at somebody in a relationship or tired. And so then what do? I mean, let's say you do something really nice for your friend. You throw her a surprise party and she loves it, and you have a really nice gathering with a bunch of your friends there, and your best friend then doesn't really say thank you or doesn't show her appreciation for you putting in all this work and time to throw her a really nice surprise party. You get no thank you. And most likely you're thinking, well, she didn't see all of this work that I did, all of the thought I put into getting everyone together. And here's the big question that you need to be asking yourself if you find yourself in a similar situation is, do you see and listen to yourself? Do you give yourself the appreciation that you're seeking from outside of you? Do you appreciate all the time and effort that you put into your friendships, into doing kind things for other people? Do you take a step back and go, I appreciate myself. I see that what I do for my family and friends comes out of a place of kindness. And I don't mean this kind of grandiose kind of self-love or this kind of narcissistic self-love. It's a genuine appreciation for who you are. Because let's face it, a lot of us don't just appreciate who we are for who we are right now in this moment. Because we can come up with tons of excuses not to appreciate ourselves. We can be like, okay, we're not thin enough, we're not smart enough, we're not pretty enough. Oh, we didn't finish that degree that we wanted to. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we can't appreciate ourselves right in this moment, and that we go out in the world and we look for other people to see and hear us when maybe we don't take a look at ourselves and go, hey, I'm pretty okay. I can appreciate the goals I have achieved. I can appreciate the things that I do for people. I can appreciate myself. Because when you start to recognize that in yourself, you won't really go out and try to find that person that gets you, that person that sees and hears you. And the funny thing that actually happens is when you see and hear yourself, is that the rest of the world kind of notices. And I mean, you really got to see and hear yourself and appreciate yourself. And one of the ways that, well, there's a lot of ways that we fail to kind of maybe not do this on a regular basis, is we don't often listen to ourselves. We don't listen to our true desires. And I've done many episodes about listening to your true desires, and it kind of always comes back to that, because do you really see and listen to yourself when there is a true desire to achieve something? Maybe it's to write a book, maybe it's to create art, maybe it is to go back and finish that degree. Are you seeing and listening to that desire that's in you? And the other way that we don't necessarily listen to ourselves is we also don't practice self-care. We don't take care of ourselves when we're tired. That's also appreciating our bodies, that sometimes our bodies need to rest. We don't schedule that in. We don't schedule just having kind of this mental kind of relaxation too that we need in our lives so that we can go out there and contribute in the world and do the things that we want to do. And the other thing that we often don't listen to ourselves is boundaries. We don't set limits in our lives. We may be chasing 20 things at a time, but yet we don't even set a limit. So maybe I should just chase 2 things that I really, really want, the 2 things in my life that I want. Maybe it's to get healthier and just go after that goal and set kind of a limit there, or set limit with our time in areas of our lives where are not so much a priority or where we genuinely don't want to? Do we set limits there? Because to me, listening to yourself means honoring your true desires, taking care of yourself, and setting those limits that help take care of yourself. And I think that when you do that, you feel seen and heard because you're giving yourself that gift of seeing yourself and honoring yourself and what's going on with you. And I'm going to leave you with this question. Could you, for today, just enjoy being you? I'll check back with you next week.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.